The Fantasy Animation Podcast is a completely independent production. It is made by experts in the field. Chris is a lecturer in liberal arts and visual cultures education at King's College London and author of The Computer Animated Film, available in all good bookshops. And I, Alex that is, am a senior lecturer in film and media studies at the University of Portsmouth and author of Encountering the Impossible, the fantastic in Hollywood fantasy cinema, available in even better bookshops. We do this podcast to provide audiences with an informative and hopefully entertaining guide through the ways in which you can not only enjoy fantasy and animation, but study it, examine it, explore it, and of course, make it and have a career in it. I hope you enjoy the show.
Hi listeners and welcome to the latest Fantasy Animation podcast with me, Chris Holliday.
And me, Alex Sargent.
Alex, it's finally happened. We're finally doing Frozen.
Yeah, I know. It feels a bit weird, doesn't it?
The film Tangled could have been, or should have been, or Tangled is the film Frozen could have been.
This is the film that listeners email in or tweet us saying, why haven't you done an episode on Frozen yet? And you might be about to find out why we haven't done an episode on Frozen yet, but it's a film long. We've been aware we're probably going to have to tackle eventually, and I'm pleased we're tackling it in the way we are today because, I think it's a film I think both of us are a bit ambivalent on.
Yep.
And I think that's why we've been a bit reticent to take it on today. For me, I think the film speaks to some really interesting kind of histories of fantasy, the musical. I think I've got a lot to say about Wicked and the influence of Wicked on this movie. I think that's probably where some of my grumpiness comes from.
Sure.
As a fantasy scholar, you just think Tangled's better, right?
I do think Tangled's better, and I think there are two reasons why we've perhaps not done it on the podcast. I think the first reason, as you say, will become clear in terms of our guest, who will kind of take us through the film, I think. The other reason is it's kind of a beast, isn't it? Like this film is the sort of one that's signalling Disney's quote-unquote resurgence, latest renaissance, third golden age, whatever it is we're going to call it. This is the film that's kind of marked a sea change in the way Disney, I guess as an animation studio, but I guess more broadly as well, as a company, as a corporation. Frozen is like their sort of, the ur-text of the 2010s, I would say. So we'll crack on. I've got some stuff to say about its kind of position within that history, I think, Disney's internal history. But as I said, we're very much going to be led by our special guest. So we're delighted to welcome Dr Eve Benhamou, who is a teaching fellow in film studies at the University of Montpellier. Prior to this, she taught at the University of West England School of Animation, Swansea University, and the University of Bristol. Her research explores the multifaceted relationship between animation and contemporary live-action cinema, with a focus on aesthetics, film genres, so we can definitely get into the genre element, and of course representations of gender. She's published her first monograph in 2022, Contemporary Disney Animation, Genre, Gender and Hollywood, which is currently sitting on the table and has as its front cover Frozen, which is Edinburgh University Press, and she's also contributing chapters to Feminine, Masculine on Gender in English Language Cinema and Television, the Oxford Handbook of the Disney Musical, and the Routledge Companion to Animation Studies. Her work's also featured in Animation Practice, Process and Production, the Animation Studies 2.0 blog, and a blog called Fantasy Animation.
I've heard of that.
Yes. So, Eve, thank you ever so much. We waited a while to do Frozen, and we're really delighted that we're doing it with you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm delighted to talk about it.
I think before we...
Before me and you start getting grumpy.
No, not at all. It's sort of like, I know this film, I know this film is kind of important to your research. We've known each other a long time. Both of us have seen you give presentations on contemporary Disney animation, contemporary kind of computer animated Disney. Frozen's obviously a key text for you. So where does it sit? What's your journey into Frozen? It's obviously really important to your research and the kinds of things that you write about with regards to Disney and gender and genre.
So yeah, Frozen was the film that kind of propelled the direction of my doctoral thesis. I had worked and written on Disney fairy tale and contemporary Disney fairy tales before that. And what is interesting about this film is that obviously it draws on the legacy of Disney fairy tale films, on the representation of princesses, very self-reflexively and very is in explicit dialogue between those representations and the critiques of those representations. And at the same time, it draws on other generic influences like the action film, the adventure film, and the superhero genre, which for Disney in that period, in the 2010s, becomes quite central because of Disney's acquisition of Marvel and the more prominent role of superheroines in contemporary Hollywood. So Frozen really is that film that kind of gathers all generic influences that characterize Disney in that period. And the film genre really was the direction for my doctoral thesis.
So it's kind of got we'll get onto the aesthetic qualities and the fact that it's this kind of beautiful, ornate, computer animated film full of digital spectacle. But it seems like immediately there's a real sort of industrial importance to the film. You mentioned Disney's acquisition of Marvel. So for you, this film is kind of bearing the weight of certain industrial shifts that are happening kind of out there, and so as much as its formal quality is, it sort of stands in an interesting period, as I mentioned in the intro, because of how it has propelled forward this latest golden age. But in your work, you're kind of suggesting that it absorbs some of the other kind of industrial give and take that's happening at this time.
Yes, definitely. And we mentioned Marvel, but we can also mention Pixar and the fact that Brave is released 1 year before, 2012, and there are so many parallels and interesting intersections between Brave and Frozen as well. So I really feel that Frozen draws on the influence of Pixar, the influence of Marvel, but also the whole history of Disney animation in terms of fairy tales and musicals. So really that film very explicitly, in a very self-aware way, is in dialogue with all that.
Yeah. Before we started recording, we were talking about the Disney formula and this idea of, and I think this has come up a lot in our conversations with Disney, and I know that you've kind of given your own spin, and I think as you said, it's kind of an elaborated definition of the Disney formula that tries to pay attention not just to what's happening in the films, but these industrial forces. So this is a kind of, I think nominally Frozen is considered a quintessential classic princess fairy tale. And by
he's doing quotation marks.
I am doing quotation marks. And we can get into the distinction between classic and typical, of course, and canons and Disney's careful curation of its own history. So what is this film kind of an embodiment of the Disney formula as you've interpreted it and as you see it?
It does engage with elements of that formula in a very explicit way in the presentation of Anna, especially in the way the musical sequences are constructed.
Yeah.
We have the duet, the romantic duet song, which is again a very self-aware construction of previous romantic Disney ballads, but it becomes the villain song. We have Anna singing about finding true love, again, very explicitly drawing on the canon of previous Disney princesses singing about wanting to meet the one. So we have all these elements, the appearance of a beautiful dress as well. There are many references to Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and the True Love's Kiss, and all these elements engage with those, which has come to be perceived as Disney's way of doing fairy tale, Disney formula, because obviously they have, when that film is released in 2013, the reception was, it's modern, it's feminist, it's a reinvention of the representation of female heroines in Disney films. But obviously there has been that wave of action-centered animated films like Mulan, Atlantis, Pocahontas, or in films where women are more in the action mode, if I should say. But this is not what this film is referring to. This film wants us to have that fairy tale framework, and look, this is starting like a classic fairy tale. Anna is singing to little birds, and she wants to meet the one. So in that film, Disney forces us to expect a classic fairy tale, and I'm using quotes.
I was going to say, why are we using quote marks?
I'm glad you're using quote marks. I think what you're talking about in your work, even what I like about your work, is that you're articulating a newness to the movie, and I think it's very tempting. And there's probably productive reasons that I'm sure you're about to go on and say, but it's quite tempting when we do Disney kind of qualitative analysis or indeed kind of periodization to kind of keep obsessing with this idea of return. And we've talked on the podcast ad nauseum a bit about this before, but like, you know, I'm not quite sure ever what we were returning to and whether we were ever there when we started. Do you know what I mean? Like, so you're right. It takes it knowingly positions itself against this kind of framework of Disney fairy tale, but actually it's doing some things that are very different with that framework. That see it feel much more, as you say, superheroes. I mean, we could talk about Pixar, we could talk about DreamWorks and the kind of post-Shrek world in which this thing inhabits. Action, adventure, all these different kind of new things are being fractaled through the Disney kind of stained glass of it all.
What is the Disney formula?
Mainly
because I know that you've defined it really nicely.
The definition I tried to come with is the combination of a distinct, seemingly cohesive, and the seemingly is important there, seemingly cohesive animation aesthetic, so believability, sentimentalism, and at the same time a discursive emphasis on specific genres, the musical, the fairy tale, and all of this is supported by a growingly imposing synergistic machine, so all the merchandising and the things that support the films. So if we say Frozen engages with or meets elements of the Disney formula, where we have, you know, like believability in terms of the design of the character, we have a fairy tale musical, we have that idea like the film is going to become merchandise, and the Frozen merchandise has been gigantic.
Sure.
So this is engaging with that, but including elements from you know the Disney's multiverse, if we may call that, like Marvel and Pixar and everything. This is also the idea of the formula is also like the perception. It draws on when we talked about the formula. For example, you mentioned the post-Shrek thing. Like what does Shrek do? It parodies the fairy tale. It parodies the princess singing to Little Bird. What does Frozen start? Like Frozen starts with Anna singing to Little Bird. So we have this element of we know the film opens. We know that you expect a class. Let's put all the ingredients of what you expect of a Disney fairy tale, and the film starts with that until it just pivots to something else.
Interesting. So, should we? I don't know how we should do this. We should go through the film kind of sequence by sequence if we can. But we said we're a bit grumpy. We should probably declare our grumpiness before we get going as to why we've. Because this is very much the film that the kind of new wave of Disney kind of rests upon, right? This is the film that we need another Frozen, I suspect, is said in kind of production meetings up still to this day.
How can we recapture the magic of this sort of lightning in a bottle moment of Frozen?
Yeah. So should we very quickly, why don't you like it, Chris? I'll say why I don't like it, and then we can get on with actually kind of trying to do the film some nuance and some sophistication.
It's funny because it's not that I don't like the film as such. I really enjoy. We've had conversations about this, Eve. You know what I'm going to say. I enjoy Tangled more. I think
Tangled was out what?
2010.
2010. So you feel Tangled should be this flag bearer?
Yeah, and I think it's doing. It's kind of doing a lot of the sort of anarchy of Aladdin. I can see Flynn and the kind of horse in Tangled is very much Aladdin, and and the genie. I can sort of there's something. So I do really like Tangled. I think with Frozen, I think the issue about the focus that is placed on sisterhood, I think is slightly misleading, given the two sisters never spend any time on screen together. I think that's a really interesting thing. They spend a lot of time apart, and I think there's a way in which the interpretation of the film has rested quite heavily on the relationship between the two sisters, where I find other elements of the film, Olaf, for example.
Did you want to? We'll set these up as our research questions as we go through the film. But so one of them is this film is celebrated in terms of its representation of gender. You have quibbles with that.
I think there are some other things that are interesting about the film beyond, like I love the visual style. Sure. So I think there's a sort of an emphasis on their relationship that I think maybe diverts some of the more interesting elements of the film. I do really like kind of Tangled. I'm interested, I guess, in the way in which this film has been shaped, exactly as you say, as this kind of flag bearer, and what that act of doing it by Disney tells us about how Disney have curated their history, and the instability of the formula, the fact that barely any of the 65 or 66 movies are princess movies, and the kind of default, the distinction between classic and typical, and the ones that are canonized. And I think, for me, Frozen embodies exactly those kinds of tensions because of the way it's been celebrated and discussed as this kind of quintessential film that seems to reveal, based on your work, Eve, actually the instability of the formula, and actually that we should update thinking about the formula to embrace these new genres that you've talked about in your book. Okay. Alex.
Well, do you want to come back on any of that?
So I will just...
I don't hate the film, I should say. I just do love Tangled.
So maybe I should come out and say I like Tangled much less than Frozen.
Yeah, good. This is why we brought you in.
What I think is Frozen builds on definitely Tangled, and The Princess and the Frog, and Brave, and Enchanted, 2007, the live action hybrid. Frozen is the culmination of all of these fairy tale films from before. Tangled is interesting in a way, like the representation, the fact that Flynn, I read the character of Flynn / Eugene, that ambivalent character that represents like two facets of masculinity. We find that in Frozen with Hans and Kristoff, in the same way that in The Princess and the Frog you have Princess Charlotte and Tiana. In Frozen you have Elsa and Anna. So this Frozen really builds on Tangled. But what I think is more interesting in Frozen, and I think that might explain why it has been celebrated more, is the space that occupies Flynn or Eugene, whatever you want to call him, in terms of like Tangled, like the fact that in promotion for Tangled, that character has hijacked the promotion. Like this is like he was central in initial trailers. Well, this was these were marketing strategies that we can discuss in relation to Frozen if you want later. And you can see that in the film as well, in the relationship, in the dialogue between the two. Rapunzel is not afforded the same wittiness, repartee in terms of dialogue, in terms of the relationship between the two, than what happens with Frozen. Like the relationship between Anna and Kristoff, for example, like draws very early on from like screwball impulses. We have that kind of witty couple that share one-liners. Like Anna is very quickly thrown into the action-adventure setting. Like at the beginning, she struggles. I mean, there are so many parallels between the two films. Yeah. Rapunzel and Flynn, please help me out, get from my tower, and then I will help you out. Anna says to Kristoff, please get me to the North Mountain, and I will help you out. There are so many parallels, but I do think that in Frozen, the female characters are allowed more space to expand. And although their sisters don't spend that much time together, they do spend time together, and the film does alternate. Like we have sister plot, romantic plot, sister plot, romantic plot, and it's in a way that Frozen 2 kind of resolves. In a way, in the first film, there's that kind of sister element that even if you count the minutes, they spend like, I had counted that when I was doing the thesis, like maybe it's like 12 minutes, like people like can double check, but it's not a lot, but it draws the story. Like the film wants to make you believe that it is the romantic plot that will drive the narrative, and actually at the end you realize that of course it is the sister plot and there is the romantic element, but for Elsa, that it is thoroughly the sisterly element. So that's why I think Frozen is more interesting, and I personally enjoyed more for these reasons, and the musical. I think the musical sequences are constructed in a way, like drawing on what you said about the aesthetic and the digital imagery and the spectacular dimension. it really is central in Frozen in ways that entangled musical sequences, although they are important, they're almost secondary. This is, something that in Frozen, obviously, the songs were central.
So I think the issue of screen time is an interesting one. I wonder, it's been such a useful tool to kind of measure lots of things that get into our kind of politics of representation. The kind of, ideas of
Judi
agency.
Dench won an Oscar and she was only on screen for 8 minutes.
But a lot of academics, I mean, I know a previous guest podcast, Rebecca Harrison, has done some really interesting work on kind of, female screen time in the Star Wars stories. But there has been a certain kind of, I remember when Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came out, the Quentin Tarantino movie, there was a lot of talk about Margot Robbie's, how much dialogue Margot Robbie has in the movie, and it's not many lines, certainly compared to the male character. Yeah. And whilst I think that's a very, very legitimate criticism, and now isn't the space to have that debate, the retort made by Margot Robbie was that, okay, fine, but just because the character doesn't say much doesn't mean she's voiceless. And the film, certainly her presence in the film is very felt. So I wonder, thinking about it in terms of these two sisters. I mean, we're talking about the Disney formula, the way it's kind of using it. In a way, structurally, Elsa is Prince Charming. Right, in Snow White, how much does Snow White spend with Prince Charming? It's less than 12 minutes. It's probably less than 30 seconds. Yeah, they have it's probably more than 30 seconds, but they have a lovely sing-song at the beginning by a well, don't they? Or by in the balcony, and then he kisses her at the end. But structurally, Prince Charming is very important to that movie. He drives the plot, all that sort of stuff. It's not quite the same here, but in a way, the film is showing you who Prince Charming is through its structure, but we don't quite believe it until the final moments of the movie, and that actually this is the true love. This is the true love between sisters is what's important, what's driving this plot. We just for some reason don't see it because of all these kind of red herrings that are put up in there.
So that's interesting. So the film is kind of reallocating, and weirdly, so Lisa Funnell, writing about the Bond movies, obligatory Bond reference, talks about in the kind of Daniel Craig era, certain icons of the Bond franchise are being reallocated. So the Bond girl is now Daniel Craig as James Bond is now presented as the Bond girl, and the Bond girl is now a kind of floating signifier that can be inhabited by M in a film and so forth. And it seems to me that there's an interesting sort of parallel with Frozen insofar as it does have nominally the elements of the formula, but as you said, it plays with who inhabits those roles. So structurally, I always get confused, as you know, between Anna and Elsa, that one is the prince because the film is leading towards their union. So and this is what I mean about the film kind of almost drawing attention to the instability and the flexibility of the formula. It basically embodies the disembodied state of Olaf, that the whole thing. It's that can go there, that can go there, but it's doing it. So it's interesting in that sense. I would say I'd agree that I think maybe what I find interesting about the film is how it's negotiating the formula and revealing that it's sort of almost this illusory constellation of things, a seemingly cohesive thing, when actually it's Olaf. It's just a bit stuck together.
So,
Alex, why do
I not like Frozen? I have very facile reasons that I'm happy to be told are ridiculous, because they are ridiculous, but I have them and I'm sticking with them. One, I don't like Olaf. Sorry, don't like him. Don't think he's funny. Find him really irritating. Don't like Olaf. Don't really like Josh Gad. Really like the Book of Mormon. Always thought that he was really grating in that performance. Don't get it. We can talk about that. We can not talk about that. I'm not sure how profitable it'll be, but on a taste level, don't really like Olaf. My broader thing about the film is that it is that, as drawing from fantasy scholarship, it feels so indebted to Wicked, right? And I think the film partially acknowledges that through the casting of Idina Menzel as Elsa. I mean, Elsa, Let It Go is pretty much a sort of it is defying gravity. I'm afraid I've written grumpily, this is just defying gravity in my lines here. And I think, why does that matter? On one level, the film kind of acknowledges that by the casting of Idina Menzel, but a lot of the promotion and the literature was very much about this kind of creative reworking of the Snow Princess, is it, or the what's the original
Snow
fairy tale?
Queen.
The Snow Queen. It's originally based on, and this completely original story. And I would argue, no, what you did is you took the Snow Queen and you put it through a Wicked filter, and we came up with this. Having said all that, I'm also aware, and
You love Wicked.
Well, I love Wicked, so why don't I love seeing animated Wicked? And I'm quite aware that, more so than right now, than because we've just done a couple of podcasts with Pete Kunz, who was talking about Beauty and the Beast is basically The King and I. So this is not like Disney's never done this. I guess what I'm missing in Frozen that I get in Wicked is that, and if I haven't already said obligatory Wizard of Oz reference, there it is that Wicked is so much about exploring the nuances and prickly nature of a particular world, and I feel like Frozen feels very worldless to me. I'm interested in some of the films that surround this, certainly post Frozen. So after this, we get Moana and we get Zootopia. I'm not sure this fits my argument, so it's just
Big Hero
6.
Said that.
Big Hero 6 to an extent, yeah, and then some of the Pixar stuff, Coco, Encanto, where very much paying respect to and having the nuance and texture of a world is kind of part of both the aesthetics and the politics of the movie. But to me, this film feels very strangely worldless. The kind of kingdom of, where is it? Kingdom of
Arendelle.
The kingdom of Arendelle feels very, okay, I don't really understand what this is. It seems to be in the middle of an icy plain. There's this rat town up the road that we don't really get to see or hear about. It's more sort of treated as a gag. She goes up and down a mountain a couple of times. There's something featureless about, it's literally kind of very snowy and icy, but there's something featureless and unlived about the film that I'm not engaging with. Come on, Eve. Tell us why we're wrong.
I do agree with some elements. It's true that it is almost like maybe compared to all the other films you mentioned, like Big Hero 6, definitely, and Moana. Like it does feel, when you watch Frozen, it does feel like it is a bit of an episodic nature, especially because it alternates Elsa in her castle, Anna and Kristoff, and Elsa freaking out in the castle, and then Anna going back to Hans, etc. So that there is that sense of, like the characters really are central. Something that is, again, it's difficult because when you know Frozen 2 exists, and it feels like Frozen 2 painfully in detail tries to course correct some of the things you mentioned, and tries to explain, among all the other things, why where are all the indigenous people in this film? Oh, well, actually, they were trapped in a forest somewhere. And then you actually see them in Frozen 2. You understand the whole background, and they create that kind of mythology and context that you right.
Okay, that sounds like an argument as to why Frozen 2 might be a good film then.
Or why it needed to exist, maybe beyond the merchandise, like the capturing of the lightning in the bottle as well. That's interesting, that course corrects.
Yeah. There are a lot of things that I write on Frozen in my book, for example, that do not apply to Frozen 2, especially what I write, my interpretation of Elsa. That no longer works because it feels like, I don't know, like it is corrected, and again I'm using quotation marks in that film. So I do agree that there are some elements, but like Wicked, can we really compare like a Broadway musical and an animated film, which are just, I think Wicked is brilliant. It's amazing. It's a classic. Idina Menzel is amazing. She's there in Frozen. So yeah, I can't say that I disagree, but it's true that I don't know how they could have like acknowledged even more that legacy. Apart, casting Idina Menzel is already quite a huge, like a central.
I don't know if they're not going to acknowledge it, are they? But I just grumpy about it because I like Wicked so much. I don't think. It's not like Disney. It's not like, I'd say Disney, but we don't even have to pick on Disney. It's not like big Hollywood films don't have form with this. Like, that's what they do, right? They take ideas from things that are popular in the world, and I'm a massive James Bond fan. They do this all the time. So, like, I'm aware the argument doesn't really have.
It will be interesting to see if the live-action Wicked has a dialogue with
takes
Frozen.
From Frozen. Yeah, it probably will. You probably will.
It's funny that obviously you said about not being able to compare Broadway and an animated film, but obviously most scholars of the Disney Renaissance do exactly that.
That is true.
And Disney advertise that we've got this, as our podcasts and our conversations with Pete have kind of revealed, that there are from the top down this repeating presence that sort of is equivalent to the Freed unit of the 50s, where it's like we've got these creative voices that are going to repeat across these films. That's what gives them their cohesiveness, their seemingly cohesive structure. But these repeating creative personnel are part of the Broadway influence. So Disney are quite open in a way that they haven't gone, this is our take on Defying Gravity. So I get your point in terms of kind of medium specificity, actually, but I also wonder that it's interesting that Disney used this film to look back at its own history. So I think I agree. I hadn't thought about it as you said, that it was the kind of culmination of a series of, I don't want to say experiments, but a series of interesting case studies like The Princess and the Frog, and I'd probably add Get a Horse, the short film as well, that sort of plays with the Disney history. Paperman as well, that's sort of like, hey, in the digital era we can do sell. Enchanted, I think, is a kind of crucial reference point. So I buy more the argument that do I buy? I think maybe it's more productive to maybe think about, again, the use that Disney made of this film, not to acknowledge the Defying Gravities or the Broadway or the what it did is that it went, no, this is the culmination of what we've been doing. And so I think that's right, actually. The first decade of the 2000s, where they're butting heads with Pixar, and they're trying to figure out what they do that Pixar don't, and what they do that DreamWorks don't. Disney's like, that's what we... And I wrote about this in the Fancy Animation book, this idea that when the collapse of the Pixar deal threatens to happen, Disney make Chicken Little, which is all about the sky is falling. What are we going to do? The sky is falling, and then it's all fine. It ends up being fine. The end is nigh is the tagline for Chicken Little. And then you have the brave Wreck-It Ralph. This is the moment where they're trying to figure out, what do we do that the other studios don't? So I like that idea that Frozen marks this kind of the inevitable culmination of all these different. This is what Disney do. Like that I think. But it's interesting that Disney then wielded it as a sort of reflection of its own history and the things that it's been doing, rather than sort of saying that. Do you remember when we did the Broadway stuff 20 years ago? We're doing it again. But that's okay, I guess.
They sort of
I'm going to end this
that.
podcast liking Frozen, aren't I?
I don't know.
Awful.
That's for you to deal with. But he's punching the air. They marketed the songwriters, who I've desperately tried to Google because I've forgotten their names.
Lopez. Anderson Lopez
Yeah.
couple?
So they'd just come off Book of Mormon, hadn't they, and things like that. So they did kind of promote that aspect of we are drawing from Broadway.
Okay.
It's interesting that they picked, of all the things, Book of Mormon to adapt from, right? Because that seems far less Disney friendly than even Wicked, right? You know, but
I suppose then Moana then does it with Lin-Manuel Miranda. There's a sort of an acknowledgement, but it's less. Well, yeah, maybe that's true. That's true. Okay.
Although in the marketing, I remember one of the trailers did foreground like the something about the musical The Best Since the Lion King. I mean, Lion King was referenced. So again, we talked about the formula, skipping the whole 1994, 2013, everything that happened in between.
Nothing happened.
No, not the best musical since Tangled. No. That doesn't say Tangled. It says Lion King, the biggest, like the highest grossing animated film of that time. So it really tries to recapture. It's interesting, like, because you mentioned the Broadway. It doesn't mention Beauty and the Beast. It doesn't mention. No, it mentions the last huge success, Lion King.
But that went to Broadway rather than being taken from Broadway.
Well, bit of both, right? Because the film was made sort of in the high point of this kind of commercial exchange. But I mean, I know it's post. Oh my God, I've forgotten the name of the guy who.
Menken?
No, Ashman.
Ashman, right.
I know it's post Ashman, but Lion King is still drawing from that kind of Broadway talent. We still have Menken involved, do we? And we have do we have Menken involved? We have Tim Rice and people like that.
I was referring to, it's interesting, the biggest musicals.
But yes, you're right. It's now become this big.
It's now become this big musical. So it's sort of like that. Of course, that's the reference point because it transcends. It exists in two places, in Disney and Broadway.
And to put a bottom on that, of course, Frozen is now a huge musical. And I think it was Pete, not to we've done Pete enough, but he made a point in the podcast that's really stuck with me about probably you could argue that the biggest commercial success Disney had in sort of probably ever is the Lion King musical, because by all kind of estimates that thing has made like $30 billion or something insane like that. Like compared to its movies, it's small fry. Now obviously it wouldn't exist without its movies, but in terms of what makes revenue, I would love to know how much Frozen the musical has made so far in its various incarnations around the world, but it's probably more than the film has made or will ever make, even though the film is such a ginormous success. So there's something interesting there about kind of films being so crucial to kind of generating cultural capital, but actually the money is made outside of the cinema rather than in the cinema.
And I would suspect for Frozen, merchandising would be like a huge element, almost more than the film.
Yeah, and there's something, we're going to come on to the gender politics of it as we go through the movie, but like even I can't help be kind of quite moved by the continued sight of Halloween sisters dressing up as Elsa and Anna, thank you.
I can't do it.
Full disclosure, this is our third podcast of the day, so if Chris and I sound like we're flagging, it's not just our usual sense, but thank you for propelling us through into the unknown. But
nice.
Yeah, thanks. But yes, there is still something quite moving about that site if people don't remember kind of pre-Halloween. So there is something powerful about the way this film is used, even if we can talk about, we'll debate the gender politics of it, right? But
I mean, what I think is interesting specifically with Frozen as well is because the film has recently turned 10. It's a 10-year-old film, which is, but I feel like every year when you look at like merchandising, like I see like Easter eggs with Anna and Elsa, like in supermarkets, like I see continuously there have been multiple shorts, short films, theatrically released or direct to Disney Plus. As soon as Disney Plus was launched, there were like the Olaf bits, like the short films when he recounts. That was after Frozen 2, but they have sustained Frozen material since 2013 up until the sequel, and like probably up until Frozen 3 they will keep on releasing stuff, something they haven't really done with other films released at the same time. Like we haven't seen consistent. There has been one Tangled short, but that's it. Like they haven't consistently. Well, there's the TV show Tangled, so fair enough that there is a TV show. But I do feel that Frozen has that appeal that they have tried and sustained.
I think
continuously.
I think unquestionably, even however grumpy we want to be about it, that's just demonstrably true. Frozen has made the biggest cultural impact of all these movies.
But it's funny, given what you said about it being this combination of all these things, I'm interested about what it was about Frozen that was it just the digitalness of Frozen that separated it from The Princess and the Frog? Because logically you go, well, that's the thing. If Disney are going to market a film based on the stuff that they've already done and the idea of legacy, like it's Princess and the Frog is the one. It's got all the things, and it's got the kind of the ontological, fairy tales, quote unquote, work best when they are cell animated. Modern stories are digital. That's why Toy Story is, So there's a kind of Princess and the Frog has got the ontological aspect of this, the fact that it's a cell animated cartoon, and yet didn't do well. And then the next year you have Tangled. Then the year after, a couple of years after that, you have Frozen. So it seems like. What is it about Frozen? What did Frozen have that kind of The Princess and the Frog didn't? Is it just we don't want to see a cell animated cartoon in the digital era? Because I don't buy that either. Because I think they're both great. Well, they're both great films in terms of their negotiation of Disney history and Disney legacy. But I just wondered if you had any thoughts about what it was that one film in 2009 didn't have that one in 2013 did?
I mean, there are many reasons why Princess and the Frog didn't get the reception that Frozen had. I mean, like, obviously we could talk about, you know, the racial politics of the films, fact that the princess spends, if we want to count the number of minutes again, she spends 2/3 of the film as a frog herself. So we don't really. Tiana, unfortunately, doesn't have she's not afforded the same princess presence as Elsa and Anna in the film. Like, she doesn't. I mean, she does appear like with the beautiful dress and the powerful song and that Annika and Oni Rose performance, but like that relationship, like the fact that, you know, that the couple turns into a frog for most of the film, kind of like dilutes so many elements, and part of the audience at the time, and rightly so, criticized that aspect. So there were like, and obviously, because she was the first black princess, the representation came with loads of like very high expectations, and the way the film was handled, and obviously, you know, that didn't meet some of the expectations, again, understandably. Whereas with Frozen, again, you get what supposedly, seemingly, at least for most of the film, you get what you expect. You have the princesses as human princesses that change dresses as well, and which is even more important in Frozen 2. They have like 10 different outfits or something. So then you can sell 10 different outfits for the merchandising.
Yes.
And also, like, I don't know. I mean, like, you can quote the argument, which I don't personally buy, in terms of like, well, Princess and the Frog had princess in the title, and little boys don't want to watch films with princesses, which was the marketing argument used by Disney executives, and this is why we have Tangled and not Rapunzel, Frozen and not the Snow Queen, which. Is that an argument? I mean, some people argue that. I don't personally agree with that, but maybe it has some truth. I don't know.
About sisterhood.
I don't agree with the premise that little boys won't watch movies about princesses, but I think that the gendered nature of the marketing is. I mean, I remember the teaser trailer for Frozen was bloody Olaf. You know, it wasn't.
And the second feature film trailer, was who will save the day? The Iceman, the Nice Man, the Snowman or No Man, and Elsa barely appeared. You had to wait until like the third trailer to actually see Elsa and hear songs.
Yeah. But it is a film about sisterhood, though. So
well, the film
that I find interesting.
But
actually,
as much as I do want to be grumpy about the movie, the film is demonstrably effective in that factor. And let's go flip. That's how it was promoted. Fine. What's happened since is we have little girls dressing up as, you know. There's problems with that. There's commercialization with that. There's all that sort of stuff. But you know, the film isn't about Olaf, as much as I really don't like him, clearly. But like, it's not about him, and it isn't. Clearly, that's not the impact of the movie. So I'm willing to. You know, two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah, but that is interesting though, to have because the teaser trailer is him being Olaf being continually sort of disembodied, and in this battle for this carrot with the horse.
Yeah, the carrot, which like we talked about the influence of like like Pixar and stuff, but this feels weirdly enough very Ice Age.
I was about to say it's quite
blue sky out of a sudden, out of the blue. But yeah, like I think, and maybe this is something that comes to my mind right now. But why Frozen and not Princess and the Frog or other films? Maybe because there is something about the sequence Let It Go that is so spectacular and also easy to watch as a clip. You know, like it has been watched and watched and watched on YouTube, and there is something about that. And I don't think there is that one showstopper spectacular sequence that you can find in Tangled and the Princess and the Frog as much as in Frozen. I mean, when we talk about Frozen, I think Let It Go, that the sequence and the song and Idina Menzel's performance and everything, that kind of drew the film. I mean, this is the song that is most reprised, like the karaoke and the parodies that you can find online, and the thing that has been the representative of the film. So I think that might be there is something about that sequence, that musical sequence, that struck a chord and pushed the film forward.
I completely agree with you. And when you made the point earlier about the the thing about Tiana spending most of the film as the frog and not having that impact, I was going to challenge you only in the sense that I think Elsa's impact in that sequence and Elsa's impact in culture probably is far more powerful than actually Elsa's impact in, I don't know about Frozen 2 because I've not seen it, but in I think that's a quib of mine with Frozen, is that Elsa's kind of an oddly, she's never really with anyone, right? She's sort of brooding in a castle for most of it, and then kind of, I think the character almost transcends the film because Let It Go transcends the film, right? I suspect more people have seen Let It Go than they have Frozen. I expect more people who have seen Let It Go multiple times than Frozen.
And maybe it's also like she doesn't appear as much is also because there's such a complex character, and the production history of that character. Catherine Lester writes about that, how initially she was conceived as a villain, and then there was a switch in the narrative, and they were like, okay, no, actually they're going to be sisters. But she doesn't fit into, like, she draws on the history of female villains, and she doesn't have a romantic interest, but she's also the sister. I mean, she's that complex character that you can't really neatly fit into a ready-made Disney category, as opposed to Anna. Anna is the more predictable, more like what you expect more of a Disney heroine, the spunky kind of, like, she's closer to Rapunzel in some ways. And I feel like in the first film, maybe like she doesn't appear as much as Anna, but she got a she became that popular character, and maybe Disney didn't expect that she would be the one that would draw. I don't know. And she's been interpreted in very different ways, in very interesting ways. That there were queer readings of her character, and the fact that yet she was the one, maybe also because she appears not as much. She kind of she was the character where audiences could project so much onto that character, and there have been so many different readings of Let It Go, for example. So maybe that's why she's so successful in a way, because you don't see that much of her. She's very complex and mysterious. She has that show-stopping, spectacular sequence, and then people can project. Whereas Anna, she's funny, she's cool, she's exciting, but she's maybe less interesting than Elsa.
I wonder if we don't have to go too far down this quagmire I'm about to open up for us, but I wonder if there's something about, scholars have talked a lot about kind of the musical and the attempts to sort of narratively integrate the musical, and the song as an inherently kind of disabling function within kind of classical narrative. And I wonder, in the age of kind of YouTube and Vimeo and TikTok and all that sort of stuff,
I'm joining on this quagmire.
This plays out in this space because Let It Go isn't that important a sequence in the film, but it's so much more important in a world where we can pause, we can rewind, and we can extract and play. This is in many ways a compliment of the movie, but there's something about without that sequence. So there's two ways you can say it, right? The grumpy way is you go, without that sequence, Elsa wouldn't really do anything in the film, but that's like, right, but that sequence is incredibly important to the film, to its popularity, to its identity, because it can be extracted and played alongside it and outside of it, in an age where these things can. And I can remember when the film was out, even, you could watch that sequence just Disney made it freely available because it was used to kind of as this emblem of the whole movie. So I wonder if there's something, the fact that these musicals, and it's the same, this will be my last Wicked reference, I promise, but it's the same with Wicked, in that Wicked, the song everyone knows in Wicked is Defying Gravity, and if anyone goes to see Wicked, there's this felt sense of apathy in the second half, at least for a long part, because it comes right at the end of the first half. It's the song everyone's waiting for, who hasn't seen it. Half the crowd who haven't seen it before, the other half who have seen it and are there for the nth time. But once the song's happened, it's like, even though there's so much more plot to go, it's like the film sort of, that's it, right? Like, not the film. It's like the musical gone, we haven't got really anywhere to go with this, because this is the high point. We didn't necessarily mean it to be, but it has become that because of the way it's been used and shared.
No, I agree. And as you before you started talking, I was thinking about the history of YouTube and looking at the Wikipedia page, as we all do as part of our diligent research.
The rigorous approach to analysis we do on this podcast.
So I remember seeing Let It Go on YouTube as a standalone music video, essentially, prior to... before seeing the... Okay. So looking at the history of YouTube, between 2010 and 2012, there are loads of changes to its algorithm, the way that the homepage resembled, the way the redesign of the homepage, the introduction of channels and playlists and stuff like this. And you might also like video recommendations. As of early 2013, YouTube video recommendations contain both videos and channels. So in the history of the page, the Wikipedia page for YouTube, it partitions out a period before 2013 and a period after 2013 that all these changes were happening.
Interesting.
And so I wonder, looking at them research on YouTube, this is a quote from a book actually on Polish popular music on screen, YouTube quote, which significantly affected the way films are watched as decontextualized fragments. And then the example is musicals. New Polish musicals are in really multimedia phenomena whose life is a collection of clips available on YouTube, and then goes on to talk about kind of that overshadows the actual text itself. So I wonder whether and this is throwing a thing into a dartboard. I wonder whether one can account for a percentage of the film's impact due to the fact it coincided with a new way to watch feature films. And of course, Disney were like, well, good, the musical's because you can just extract the song.
Yeah.
You just extract the song, and that's popular. So I was like, I wonder whether Disney's quite return to musicals, if they ever left, but that kind of return to musicals is kind of almost motivated by, we can merchandise this, not just with sing-along kind of, merchandise in that sense, but actually the platforming of Disney musicals lends itself very well to this extraction of particular hits. So I just wonder whether the kind of history of YouTube actually, and the memeable nature of the short burst musical numbers are in conversation with the way Disney's doing things. I have no evidence for that other than what I just read out.
Do you want to build a paper?
In this vlog, I will.
Yeah. Could I talk about the
Let's
villain?
start the film. Let's talk about the
well,
film.
can we talk about we're clearly not going to go through the film beat by beat because we're not. But it's not going to be one of those episodes, ladies and gentlemen. But I think we've kind of, we've dealt with a lot of its key concepts and ideas. We haven't talked about the villain. And I have a half-finished question / thought that I don't really know where I'm going to go with this. But I was thinking a little bit about, I've completely forgotten the villain's name. Hans is the villain, yeah? So I was thinking about Hans and the idea of the kind of concealed villainy, which seems quite a modern, if we're talking about the ways in which, if we return to sort of the classic, the Disney Renaissance or the classic Disney, classic villains are not concealed.
Concealed, don't feel.
And I've just realised the kind of resonance of that line and everything. But there is something interesting about the fact that the villainy is concealed in this movie, in the sense that what we have here is, he's like the Prince Charming figure, but he's not Gaston. Gaston, who is the Prince Charming figure, is clearly the villain from the moment he is introduced into the film. So you're nodding a lot, Eve, which is good. So do you want to say some stuff about concealed villainy and what that does?
I have, in terms of this figure, I had two readings, ways of, again, drawing on film genre. So this is one of many ways of interpreting that. So in one way, again, if we see Frozen as the culmination of whatever, it's also, in 10 years, Disney is, how I read Frozen and all the films before that we quoted is, how can we make fairy tales after Shrek and after DreamWorks basically mocked very explicitly and rendered completely made Disney fairy tales ridicule? So there are different strategies. Princess and the Frog tries the nostalgia, cell animation strategy. Tangled draws on DreamWorks very much with the figure of Flynn, which feels like a DreamWorks character in a way, and Frozen draws on that. Prince Charming is the villain, is not new because we already have that in Shrek, but it's the concealing way. And the concealing, that is very new. And it's basically saying, Disney having, we're revising the fairy tale and we're doing that by first providing that new like those princesses, although we have one princess slash villain slash very complex character with Elsa, a more traditional princess Anna, but we get rid of the Prince Charming figure. This is it. We're getting rid of him. And that's why he appears as the villain. Like I feel this at the end, like Anna basically punches him in the face. He falls down into the water, and this is it. And there haven't been Prince Charming figures in animated fairy tales since Frozen. It feels like Frozen, like, okay, we're not doing that anymore. And we talked about gender, but this is something about, like, the way masculinity is portrayed in the film. It feels like it tries to be progressive in a way that, okay, Prince Charming, like the Prince Charming figure draws on, chivalry and rescues of the damsel in distress, which draws upon the fact that women need to be rescued, and the prince is supposed to be that heroic figure. But when we have that reveal, and I remember being in the cinema room, hearing people say, "Oh, he's not kissing her." People were surprised. There were like tension in the room. But he says, "I'll be the one restoring Arendelle to Grandeur." I mean, he says something like that. "I'll be the one rescuing Arendelle, and Elsa will be like the villain or something." And when we have that low-angle shot and thinking, oh, actually Prince Charming, that figure draws on the fact that women are unequal and inferior and need to be rescued, and all depends on the male character, and showing that kind of imbalance that the film tries to course correct. And it's the female character that will save the day. Anna, through an act of sacrifice and sisterly love. So there's that element, like kind of revising the history of Disney and the fairy tale. And also in terms of concealed villainy, if you look at one of the generic lenses I use to talk about Frozen is also the romantic comedy, and the aspect that in romantic comedies you often that wrong partner kind of figure, and so from the perspective of the romantic comedy, you kind of expect Christoph to be the one, quotation marks, because we know that the love at first sight situation is too quick, and Hans ends up being the wrong partner, and it's the person who you don't suspect. The opposites attract kind of situation, with Anna and Christoph having nothing in common and don't really liking each other at the end, but they have to work together, as opposed to Hans being the idealized figure. Well, we understand that if you use that romantic comedy lens, he's the wrong partner. So obviously he's not good for the heroine, and the heroine will end up in that relationship with a more kind of balanced, more balanced in terms of gender role, and more equal. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I think it's certainly riffing on and crystallizing a lot of what I'm thinking through here. Yeah, and you're right about the kind of, I mean, for various professional reasons, I ended up watching It Happened One Night again quite recently, and in many ways, the two male leads in Frozen are the kind of classic, rom-com template of the one that's all right, but you sort of know she shouldn't really be with, and the real one. I think the only thing I would challenge is that, like, they're both idealized, right? In It Happened One Night, the schlub she gets paired with is Clark Gable. Like, it's not too bad a person to get paired with, and Christoph doesn't seem particularly feckless. He seems like a nice, handsome, caring. There are two forms of idealization, I guess. Like that. Yeah. He's certainly not a Prince Charming in the kind of regal sense of the world, but he could be Aladdin. Like, he could be that kind of,
street rat.
Well, I mean, kind of, plucky, street smarts, but handsome.
Good heart. But
good heart. Yeah, all that sort of stuff. I'm interested in this. So villains are often how Disney is most kind of vilified, right? In terms of this embodiment of evil. Often how they embody evil is through, this idea that evil can be embodied in these kind of wicked stepmothers is obviously problematic in terms of, what is the nature of evil that isn't in these kind of ghouls. Also, how do we embody evil? We often embody in racialized terms, in gendered terms, in ideas of beauty and standards of beauty, in able bodies and all this kind of stuff. So, on one level, I like the idea of a villain that isn't obvious from the start, but I'm comparing it now with Moana. So Moana kind of has a concealed villain, right?
Well, I was going to say there's a whole this is a whole trend. So
but there's a difference with Moana.
Yeah.
Moana, the villain is the concealment is that the villain isn't a villain. It's someone with quite righteous cause to be upset who ends up deciding not to do the villainous thing, which feels like a more real world kind of version of evil, right? We're all capable of villainy, but none of us are villains. They are villains. They're like mustache twirling, ha ha ha, I will destroy the kingdom and destroy you in the concept. But I'm concealing it behind this kind of veneer of charm, all this kind of stuff. I wonder if this is 2012, so it's certainly not a Trump thing. It's certainly not a fake news thing, but it's perhaps it's articulating some things in culture that were... there's something about like... That's not the real truth. The real truth is happening behind the scenes, you know. So on one level, it's progressive, right? On one level, it's like villains aren't villains aren't being.
We can't identify them visually like we used to.
You can't identify them in 5 seconds of screen time. Yeah. But once they reveal themselves, they are as villainous as Gaston. They just don't admit it from the outset. They're more crafty than that, you know.
Yeah. Again, like that is why it's so efficient, because if Anna embodies the archetype of the Disney princess without knowing it, kind of singing to little birds and waiting for the one. But Prince Hans also very consciously does perform that masquerade of Prince Charming. In the same way, again, if you look, my argument of Frozen being the culmination of everything that came before, in The Prince and the Frog, Prince Naveen, for most of the film, is the servant Lawrence, disguised with the appearance of Prince Naveen. So the idea of Prince Naveen for most of the film is a masquerade. And in Enchanted, Prince Charming is just that silly, stupid, useless figure that is just there to bring
buffoon,
laughs.
Yes,
exactly. So in a way, it really feels like Frozen is saying we don't like it. Beyond the villain is more like the idea of Prince Charming is dead, basically. Where we're getting rid of the idealized version of the Disney fairy tale prince, if that ever existed. Because again, going back to the idea of the seemingly cohesive formula, Disney fairy tale princes, and Amy Davis writes about that. They're very forgettable. That like in Snow White and Cinderella, they barely appear, but they make that impression of romance and idealization, and the ballad. Those characters are the ones with whom the princess waltzes and sings, and these are these very romantic sequences that are again quoted and parodied and made an impression. With that film, they're getting rid of that. They're not getting rid of the princess. The princess remains very important, but the prince, he's gone. It's done.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that is that I've talk about something I've written now. An article that I wrote about a more about basically the post Wreck-It Ralph era of Disney. We know that Disney likes to period or have itself periodized in these interesting ways in classic and Renaissance and Dark Ages and stuff. So the article that I wrote about the Baroque, concealment and masquerade are qualities of the Baroque, and part of my argument is that we've now entered the period of the Disney Baroque, essentially. And one of the values of the Baroque is also when history, Baroque, where the Disney, in this case, the Disney formula starts to fold back on itself in exactly the way that genres, you have the chaotic period of experimentation, you have the classic period of solidification, you might have a bit of experimentation, and then you have parody, and that's the moment where genres fall back on themselves. So I've basically argued that there's a post-2012 cycle of secret or twist villains. So King Candy / Turbo in Wreck-It Ralph is one. Dawn Bellwether in Zootopia is another. Robert Callahan in Big Hero 6 is another. And to some extent, Tafiti, acknowledging the slight difference in there. But the idea is that the villain is not just the kind of queer figure. It's not Ursula, it's not Jafar, it's not Scar. It's this sort of... There's a kind of... there's a mystery to it.
Pixar, Lotso, it would fit with this. Stinky Pete would also fit with this.
So I've basically argued that in the case of Frozen, it's Prince Hans' revelation that becomes a gesture of the Baroque as he represents a conscious deformation and deviation from the kind of security of this formula, because concealment and masquerade are part of what people have called as a kind of Baroque cover-up. So it's one part of a broader argument around Baroque aesthetics, but I think there's an article about Moana's The Number Shiny, so the song sung by Tamatoa, which is like, we value it's Tamatoa sings, the crab sings about the crustacean's decorative shell. That's like, whereas earlier Disney films were about the true, like the Aladdin's good heart, and this film is like, no, I like shiny things. So it's in a film in an era about kind of appearance and kind of Baroque cover-ups and all this sort of stuff. I find those twist villains part of this Baroque aesthetic in some sense.
Interesting. I don't have a response to that.
No. Article's still available. How are we doing for time?
We're not doing great for time, actually. We should start wrapping up with final thoughts.
I thought you were going to say we should start with the...
start with the opening sequence. There's no storybook open. That's my note. No, in all seriousness, I do have that on my notes. There's no storybook open. Interesting. And I'm interested in this in now watching Frozen 2, because I was also going to talk about... there is a hint in that opening sequence and in the closing sequence of this kind of indigenous community that the film never really returns to. Sounds like that's a conversation to be had with Frozen 2 more productively, so we'll park that for now.
So in terms of what's next for you in regards to kind of Disney animation and the stuff that you're writing about, can you give us before we I'll put the link to the book in the description. So
give us the title of the book one more time.
Yes, that's true. That's
Contemporary Disney Animation, Genre, Gender, and Hollywood.
And available wherever you get your books.
With Edinburgh University
Press. Great. Order it for yourself. Order it for your libraries. Order it for your students. Your module reading lists. Get it on there.
Yes,
it's a great read.
What's next then in terms of you and Disney and
so I have animation? A couple of chapters coming up on the musical sequences and looking at Ralph Breaks the Internet, but also Frozen 2 and live action remakes, and how in the contemporary landscape Disney kind of revisits the musical sequence, and I compare the way musical sequences are reframed in animation and in live action, and you see that everything I said about Prince Charming and Disney leaving romance behind, it kind of nostalgically comes back with live action. Like you get again those romantic, very nostalgic and traditional sequences that you don't get in animation anymore. Now in animation you get Raya and the Last Dragon or Encanto. You don't really see those very romantic scenes. You have that in nostalgic revivals, and then after that for Disney, that this is the direction. And I'm also interested in looking also in European animation studios. So that's next after Disney, looking at what with this book. It also, like, the summarizing question could be, what is in an era when Disney owns half of Hollywood with Marvel and Pixar and Lucasfilm, and what is Disney animation? What makes animation specific, and what is the Disney animation? Now I'm looking also into like other studios and how more like smaller independent studios try to create a brand identity, surviving and trying to differentiate themselves from big studios like Disney, Pixar.
Yeah. Interesting.
Brilliant.
Interesting. Great. Well, Eve, thanks so much for coming on the podcast and putting up with Chris and I.
I feel like I definitely like Frozen more.
I don't.
Yay.
But I like the lore of Frozen more.
Yeah.
I like I like its impact. I like its kind of paratexts. I like all that sort of stuff. I still find the film a little bit unsatisfying, but that's all right.
We've converted me anyway.
Yeah, fine. Eve. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you.
You can find us at fantasy-animation.org, where you can find our archive of blog posts and podcasts. There must be blog posts.
Yes, we've got some Frozen stuff, we've got some Disney stuff, we've got some Eve stuff.
Great, go and find all of that stuff on the website. Let us know. Leave some comments in the blog posts. And if you've got anything more to say about it, you can use the Contact Us tab to suggest your own blog posts. Otherwise, you can follow us on social media at FANANIM Research, FANANIM Research. And you can also use the same handle, FANANIM Research, at gmail.com to suggest future footnote episodes for the series. Otherwise, we've been live from Baths, hence the echoey colour. You're probably getting used to that now. But we'll see you next time.
Bye.